Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Sportscaster and Her Son, where sports bridges the gap between the generations. I'm your co-host, 12-time Emmy Award-winning sportscaster Peggy Kusinski from ESPN Radio in Chicago. I'm the mom, the sportscaster. I guess I'm also the baby boomer.
And I'm Jason Conander. I'm your other co-host. I'm a junior here at UT Austin. I'm involved in Texas Student Television, and I co-host this awesome show.
So thank you, everyone who has followed us on YouTube, our followers, our website. Everything is really doing great. Numbers are going up. We appreciate that. Please continue to spread the word, download us, follow us, tell a friend as well. And especially now that we are on the ESPN Chicago app, we want to get as much pub about our new home as possible. Don't forget, you can also check out our fan merch, right, Jace?
Yep, absolutely. Fan merch, still waiting on getting some new merch, but hopefully it's coming soon. And I can't wait to wear it.
The link to T Public Store is on our website at thesportscasterandherson.com. Okay, in this episode, listen, it's not a great time in Chicago right now with the White Sox ending their season on a sour note. The Cubs actually looked a little bit, hopeful at the end of the season. The Bears, it's going to be a very long season. So we are going to take a turn and just have some really fun with this episode. NFL coaches love to tell the media nothing. I mean, nothing. And we call it coach speak, word salad. They carry these team secrets so close to the vest. Who's playing? What kind of injury do they have? And I always laughed, like I thought it was a big overreaction and they were all being melodramatic. But Jason, I started in Chicago with John Fox, and he came in and he immediately went Spygate on us. Like everything was a top secret. And it made me think, if this stuff really does go on in the NFL.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it absolutely does go on in the NFL. And I think that one of the beauties of sports, one of the things that has interested me the most in sports is how teams, coaches, everybody, the players, how they look to gain a competitive edge. And that's really what I'm the most looking forward to about this episode is the NFL is the biggest league in America and also has the most of the, not necessarily cheating, but scandals involving trying to gain a competitive edge. You look at Deflategate, you look at Spygate, both involving the Patriots, but recent examples in the NFL. So it's always interested me a lot. And I think it's something that doesn't get talked about enough because it's something that every team in every pro sport absolutely does.
So I don't know if you realize this, but there were a couple of other incidences in the NFL in which media, what do they call them? The team video people actually got fired because of filming opposing teams' practices. Like one time in London, that was easy to do because it's fairly open and the coaches don't know the stadiums. They don't know who's in there. Another time, I can't remember where it was from, but ironically, Jason, one of them I want to say was with the Denver Broncos. Ironically, both guys used to work for the Patriots. I'm not saying, I'm just saying.
Yeah, and I think another thing that's really interesting is like the Patriots are the most recurring example in the NFL, but if you go across the scope and you go to baseball, some of the most successful teams of the past decade in baseball have also been the teams that were caught up in the cheating scandals. You look at the Houston Astros, the only team other than the Boston Red Sox that has actually been caught. New York Yankees also got accused of using Apple Watches. So it really is all across sports. And that was one of the most compelling storylines when the whole Astros thing was at the forefront of the news was everyone kind of knew that teams were doing their own things against the rules to gain a competitive edge. But the Astros were really just the first one to get caught and maybe the first one to use it to win a World Series. We don't know. But that's really the most interesting thing about this is in a world where everybody thinks that they know everything that goes on behind the scenes, this is something where truly we don't know anything about.
So I remember one time when I was covering a Chicago Bears game on the road, and I can't remember what stadium I was in, but after the game, we would go find some empty suites to record our audio tracks for television because we needed a quiet place. We couldn't do it in the press box. And this one time I walked into an empty suite and it turned out it was the coach's box. And they left playbook and they left everything in there. And wow. I took it and started looking at it and thought, I can't read this thing. Like, what am I going to do with it? And I left it there. But what I found interesting was that they left all their notes, they left everything. And I bet that happens more than we realize because the coaches are in such a hurry and they're frustrated. They either win or they lose, end of the game, last minute, and they jump out of the box as fast as they can to get into the elevator and to get down to the locker rooms. So it makes me wonder. Oh, here's another story I have for you. I once knew a garbage man who worked in a suburb of Chicago and routinely collected garbage for the late Michael McCaskey. Michael McCaskey, this was right after firing Mike Ditka. And Michael McCaskey was in charge of the team. He was the president of the team at the time. And this garbage man found all the old Ditka playbooks and everything in the garbage right after they fired Mike Ditka. So
Wow.
I'm telling you, there's ways that you can find information on other teams, but as a member of the media, it frustrates me because they routinely just shut up on us and we get less and less information now.
And this is a really interesting topic for me because somebody who's studying journalism right now, we're taught about the ethics and how you have to be ethical as a journalist. And trying to gain that inside edge on other teams is one thing if you're in the league and if you're trying to win a game on Sunday. But yeah, it cuts both ways as a member of the media. You're always trying to get that extra piece of information that nobody else has. And like you said, you snuck it, you found yourself in the coach's box and they left all those notes. One thing that I think of is 2 weeks ago when the Buffalo Bills lost to Miami and Ken Dorsey, their offensive coordinator, just lost his mind in the press box and threw all his notes. I wonder what ended up with those notes. Like, I wonder where those went.
Exactly.
So it's funny to think about.
This is what I'm thinking, Jason. It's Halloween. What better time than to have a little thriller of an episode this time of year, right? So I was thinking we should call in someone who knows a little bit about espionage on the sidelines in the NFL. Let's bring in our guest, Kevin Bryant, author of Spies on the Sidelines. Kevin, thank you for joining us. I want to give people a little bit of background about you. You are an Army veteran, over 20 years of experience gathering information for the Department of Defense, 13 years as a special agent conducting national security investigations, and you also instructed federal agents in training. Any of those federal agents become NFL coaches?
Not to my knowledge.
So you have a book and it's called Spies on the Sidelines. I love this so much. As I just got done telling Jason, in my 25 years of covering football, I've had a couple of instances. One time I went into a late at night after a game, we were doing our audio recordings and I had to find a quiet place. And I went in, the stadium was pretty empty. And I went into a booth and it turned out to be one of the coaches' booths. And they left all their paperwork, their playbook, they left everything there. And there was a side of me that so badly wanted to take it and take pictures and do a story on it. And I should have, I think, but then the Catholic part of me said, no, don't do it. Leave it there. I left it there. And then more recently, John Fox, when he coached the Chicago Bears, was notorious. He was so afraid of espionage. He cut all of the media access in half. We weren't allowed to shoot video of anything because he said one night when he was coaching the Giants, he was sitting in a hotel room, turned on the Sunday night sports show, and he saw a segment breaking down what they do on defense. And he said, well, now we know what they're doing. So I guess as much as I'd like to think that espionage really doesn't happen in the NFL, your book, Spies on the Sidelines, tells us it does, doesn't it?
Well, it does. And espionage in sports is a very big deal. You know, I just put on my Twitter account yesterday an article. This isn't football related, but Qatar, which is hosting the World Cup this year, allegedly paid a company ran by a former CIA officer up to $300 million plus to spy on FIFA officials and other people that were of influence in where the World Cup would host the World Cup. So if a team's, if you're talking about, a team willing to spend, given, through a country, but up to $300 million, espionage in sports is not a small thing. This is a business worth billions and billions and billions of dollars. So absolutely it takes place. And, your mention of, do you take that paperwork or don't you? That is the quintessential question for these coaches that find this material, or maybe that are hunting for this material, right? Do you do this or do you don't? And is it allowed or is it not? Or is it all in how you do it? There are so many ethical questions and so many, so many difficult decisions to make as a coach.
Kevin, one of the other stories I just told my son was I had a friend who was a garbage man. And right after the Bears fired Mike Ditka, he was collecting garbage. And one of the homes that he routinely collected garbage from were the owners of the Chicago Bears. And sure enough, there in the garbage were all the playbooks, everything from when Mike Ditka was coach, everything. And this garbage man kept them. And I thought, boy, if that happened today, he could get thousands of dollars for even an old playbook like that, thousands of dollars, because I'm guessing, and give us an idea, what is it that teams are looking for? What is it that they will go to great lengths to even get a slight edge by doing what?
Yeah, so all that information that's in the garbage, hunting through the trash, that's a profession. A secondary duty for some coaches in college and pro football, both. Absolutely something goes on, searching through other teams' locker rooms, searching through trash bins of other teams' facilities, going through hotel rooms of other teams. Sometimes
Seriously?
after they've left, sometimes, hiring hotel employees to help you out with this stuff. These are all concerns that NFL teams, have to look at. And this type of spying activity, it goes on. So it's a very big deal. So those playbooks, what are you looking for? Well, okay, the plays you can pretty much see on film. But what's really of value is when you can find out what is the name of the play, or what is the signal of the play that's associated with it. Because then if you can overhear that or see the hand signal that corresponds to that play, you can match those two up. And once you have those matched up, if you are a coach and you see that from the sideline or overhear a verbal audible called out at the line of scrimmage, you know what's going to happen, because at that point, you're familiar with the play. And that is what coaches want to be able to do. And there's a multitude of means you can use to do that. You can get the other team's playbook. You can match up stuff that you see on film. You can debrief players that formerly belonged to that team, or bring them in just a week or two before you play once they've been released, or signing players off the practice squad. All of that goes on behind the scenes in the NFL.
With all these teams doing this now, is there sort of like, are these teams also putting in preventative measures? Are they are they watching out where they throw out their playbooks, like being real clean about the locker rooms, especially the visiting locker rooms? Like, what are teams doing to prevent this? Because if they're doing it, then they have to be conscious of it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jason. So one of the big things in my book is not just how do teams collect information, it's how do you defend against the collection that takes place. So, for example, with playbooks and with paperwork, teams are generally very security conscious. Even going into a away facility, typically a member of the security staff for a team is going to go through and search the locker room when they're done. If they hand out play sheets before a game, just to be able to review what's the strategy for the game, what are we going to do, a member of that security staff will collect all of that up. Oftentimes, the information that is disseminated is bound together so that there aren't loose sheets of paper. It's one big packet that can be counted. And once they're done with the paperwork, it either is brought back by a security official or it's shredded. They'll bring an actual shredder to the location and shred all that paperwork before they leave. So, yeah.
I want to start hearing about some of these stories because this is so interesting. It's something that, as we talked about in our opening segment, it's something that I don't think is talked about enough. Because one of my favorite parts about sports is these teams, coaches, players, all looking to gain a competitive edge. So give us an example of. Let's start with the playbooks because that's what we've been talking about. What's a good story? Something in your book that contains stealing information from a playbook or information that one team didn't want to end up in the hands of another team.
Oh gosh, with a playbook. So what I'll say with the playbooks is, every coach is, since the history of the league has been around, coaches have been searching for these playbooks, and some coaches have pretty much got the playbooks of every other team in the league at one point or another. There's one player. I got an example of my book. A guy who left the team, okay, kept his playbook with him and attempted to sell it to a competitor. And that team actually took the high road and they actually went to the FBI and turned this guy in. So
now, Kevin, that's like a $50,000 fine if you do not turn in your playbook or your tablet. When the team lets you go, you are subject to a fine, even if you're not with the team anymore. So that explains why that's in there.
And so some teams go to great lengths to protect it. Obviously, those fines. Another things that players do to try to instill that sense of you have to protect this. These are our secrets, okay? So they will actually make a game of trying to steal other players' playbooks to drive home this point. Okay. And one player is known to have, I can't remember exactly who it was. It was rather recent. They would actually take information and plays from the previous year's playbook and insert it into the other player's playbook that they had stolen just to confuse the living daylights out of that player and to drive home the point that you can't lose this thing, So, and some, players are known to literally sleep with their playbooks. That's how nervous they are about losing these things.
Yeah. So, Kevin, tell me we see this happen all the time now that they have the audio in the helmets where the play is coming in through the helmet. And when they have a problem and we always see the quarterback is holding his hands, trying to listen and then they have to go to hand signals because there's a problem. Is there any chance that there's something fishy going on with that radio frequency?
There's a very big chance that something fishy is going on with that radio frequency. Yeah. And so, it's a big question, right? And some experts will tell you it's just not possible. Okay. Because those headsets are protected with military level encryption. Okay. And there's no way that another team can tinker with them or at least listening in on them. Listening in is the big thing, right? Can you block the signal? Blocking it is easier. Okay. Actually, decrypting the signal to be able to listen in is a whole nother story. However, okay, what do you ultimately need to get, right? You've got this military encryption, which is great. Okay. Think of it like a big safe. Okay. You've got this great safe that no one can break into, but what do you need to get into a safe? A code. Yeah. And if you know the code, all the extra bells and whistles don't do you a darn bit of good, right? And so the question becomes, can you steal another team's code to be able to know how to gain access to their headset frequencies? And so one thing that the Patriots, are accused of doing, and this is a team, the Patriots have been suspected. There's always headset problems at, Gillette Stadium and in Foxborough, right? But the question is, well, how can you do this? Okay. Well, one of the things that anonymous former Patriots staff members have said is that the Patriots would go into opponents' locker rooms, and steal their play sheets, their upcoming plays at the start of the game, and that way they would know what's going to transpire for probably roughly the first quarter of a game offensively for an opponent. Have a pretty good idea. But if you can steal that type of paperwork, what else can you steal, right? Can you steal all the headset information? And if you can, Do you have access to this? Can you block it? Can you listen in? These are all very real concerns that opponents have, to the point that opponents have actually blocked the fire exit, the back door into locker rooms. They have put, they have blocked them. They have put chains, literally chains around the doors to prevent Patriots personnel from sneaking in. So yes, it is a
Oh
big
my
concern.
gosh, that is crazy. Anything with the Chicago Bears?
Oh man, so much stuff with the Bears. So what I will say is great about this book is, now we've got, we're all aware of the Patriots and all their shenanigans and Belichick, but the history of the NFL has a lot of coaches that were willing to go to those same extremes. Okay. So George Halas from the Bears was one of those coaches, the original coach of the Bears. Many people consider him the founder of the NFL itself. And along with guys like, Sid Gilman of the Chargers, Al Davis of the Raiders, Paul Brown of the Browns, Weave Eubank of the Jets. These are just some of the guys that were, in that same bucket as Belichick and willing to go to those extremes. So what I will say about George Halas, he was alleged to have used cowboys in other teams' locker rooms when they came to visit. He would employ them as spies to come back. Hey, whatever information they tell you, whatever information they talk about in the locker room, you come back and let me know about this. So that was one thing he was alleged to have done. Back in 1955, a Bear scout named Fido Murphy, he actually employed a kid to go spy on a Rams practice. And he wanted to know, hey, are the Rams going to play a zone defense? And so he had this kid set up who packed the lunch in a thermos on a cold day and went out and literally sat at this practice field and hid in the scoreboard all day long. And the practice didn't take place in the afternoon. He was there for like 8 hours just hiding because he wasn't sure when the practice was going to start. And, the scout let this kid know, hey, here's what you need to be able to look for to know if the team is playing zone. And the kid came back and said, yeah, they're playing zone. And so the Bears were prepared for it. The scout told the offensive coordinator what was going on and what they were going to do. And the Bears were prepared for it. And as a result, they destroyed the Rams because they knew exactly what they were going to look for. And, these are just some of the, everyday type of shenanigans that are, that have taken place in the NFL.
I gotta say though, Jason, what it makes me think of when we were at Bears training camp practice, and all these teams now restrict you from shooting any video during practice. You can only shoot during their stretching.
Yeah.
But now everybody in the stands, everybody has a camera. So I was asking some of the reporters, I said, how is it that we can't shoot it, but everybody else here can shoot it? And how do they know who all these people are? Right?
Yeah.
Couldn't that be an advanced scout, or the new term is director of research with the teams? I mean,
Yes.
these guys could easily be going to practices during training camp.
You're correct. And so, Peggy, those restrictions that were placed on the media, that started way a long time ago. Okay. Because what Paul Brown, the original coach of the Cleveland Browns, was found out to be doing was having members of his coaching staff dress up and pretend to be media members and sending them to opponents' practices. And when opponents found out about this, they said, okay, no more out-of-town media allowed at our practices. And then it's kind of rolled and snowballed from there. But, as recently as just a couple weeks ago, the Miami Dolphins, who had to move their practice before a game versus the Bengals, had to move their practice to the University of Cincinnati. And guess what happened? Well, some random person, probably a University of Cincinnati student, started filming the practice and put out video clips of this on Twitter. And the Dolphins requested of the website that posted it, which was Bengals Friendly, to take it down. And they said, no, we're not taking it down. This gives our Bengals team an advantage. Uh, so
Wow.
it's still a very big concern today. Yeah.
Yeah, so we talked about Patriots, George Halas, Paul Brown. I mean, these are some of the most successful coaches in the history of the league. Do you think that there's a correlation between winning and the coaches and the teams that are doing this like little extra bit to get a competitive edge?
That's a great question, Jason. And yes, I do. Absolutely. These are not just coaches that are winning the occasional championship. George Halas, Sid Gilman. That guy owned the AFC and the AFL for a while. Al Davis, Raiders owned the 70s. Along with the Steelers, pretty much you can split every other year. One of those teams was winning it. Bill Belichick today, these guys they're not just winning championships, they're building dynasties. And it takes to build a dynasty, it takes something above and beyond what everybody else is doing. And spying is a part of that. And spying at a level beyond where most coaches are willing to go is a very big deal. So for example, Al Davis, George Halas have both been suspected of using listening devices in opponents' locker rooms to be able to listen in on those conversations, which is, of course, a felony, but it goes to show how far coaches just might be willing to go.
So as the world gets more technologically advanced, are we seeing these techniques and these methods? How are we seeing these methods evolve? Because even though, like, I take a good example, like the Houston Astros in Major League Baseball, they got caught for the sign stealing, but sign stealing across baseball ain't going to stop. So how do you see these things evolve as the league continues to evolve?
Yeah, I'll give you a great example. So I was talking to a drone or unmanned aerial vehicle expert about the subject of potentially, could teams use a drone to spy on opponents? And his answer was absolutely 100%. And I would be shocked if it hasn't already happened, because it would be so simple to do. If you just, basically he's saying a kid who's in middle school already knows, there are kids that already know how to basically set up a relay system that if a team even tried to track down where this drone was coming from, that it would go to a secondary location that wouldn't even be where the operator was using it from. And furthermore, if you have any idea of how the sun works and clouds, and you were willing to paint the underside of your drone to blend in with the clouds, right, that you just wouldn't be able to see it. There's no chance whatsoever. And furthermore, you could park it to be able to save your battery life and record a practice as it's going on. And he said, furthermore, with even over-the-shelf software that's out there these days, you could potentially, if a team had their tablets, which they keep their playbooks on these days, right? You could potentially download that playbook if it was connected to Wi-Fi, if that tablet's connected to Wi-Fi, and download it to the software that's on the drone, bring it back, and boom, you've got their playbook. So that's just an example of how wild it can get and just what a threat technology today poses to teams.
Do you think that the NFL has consulted guys like you that have worked in special forces and are espionage experts just to make sure that the game is actually being played fairly?
Yeah, so the NFL has a group called NFL Security. And these guys are primarily former FBI agents. And yeah, so they have that background on how do you collect and protect information. But what I will say is that the NFL doesn't get into the day in and day out common stuff. They're concerned with, protecting the headsets. They hire an outside company to ensure that headsets aren't tampered with. So, there's some degree of safety there, at least. And, they'll look into some other big events, okay, such as like a Deflategate and whatnot. But a lot of times they're using outside security deal with that. They're mostly concerned with what are those events that can give the NFL a bad name. So gambling, one of the huge things that they're worried about, right? Make sure that's prevented. But gang activity, if players are considered being involved in gang activities or big time crimes, selling drugs. This is something that could give the NFL a really bad name. And so they've got these NFL security members to, one, look into the matter, and two, and most importantly, keep everything hush, hush, right?
Yeah.
Which is what we saw after Spygate, right? We've got this huge scandal, and we're not even going to do an investigation. We're going to issue a punishment before an investigation ever takes place because I want this thing done with, okay? Which completely backfires, and it makes it blow up so much worse. But that is ultimately the goal of NFL security, is to keep everything on the down low and handle everything as quietly as possible.
All right. I just got to say, Kevin, author of Spies on the Sidelines, you got me. I am so intrigued by this. I can't wait to read your book. What's been more fun, doing your research for the NFL on the sidelines with espionage, or 13 years in special forces with national security investigations?
Oh my goodness. So I gotta, I mean, it's a pretty good life when you got to choose between those two, right? I mean,
Right?
I love it. I mean,
I
really
love
is.
it.
I mean, I've been blessed. I love my job, and I've loved doing the research for this book.
Are you doing more sports related espionage books?
Yeah, so I am. So I'm about 2/3 of the way through a book on college football, spying in college football. That will be the next one that comes out.
Ooh, I'm excited.
Yeah. So lots of good stuff there, and I'm going to cover the whole recruiting aspect, which is so different than the NFL. And college football goes back about 40 years before the NFL ever started.
Yeah.
So there's so much more history. There's so many more teams, and therefore there's so many more great stories to choose from. So it's,
gosh,
really,
I can
really
only imagine the flight patterns, the tail numbers on the planes, the private jets where they're going. I can't wait to read all that stuff. Kevin Bryant, author of Spies on the Sidelines. You could reach him on Facebook at kevinbryant.author, on Instagram the same, Twitter at Kev Bryant Author, and LinkedIn Kevin Bryant Author as well. Kevin, it's been a pleasure. Really fun to talk to you. Good luck with Spies on the Sidelines.
Absolutely. Thanks, Peggy. Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it a bunch. And I enjoyed it.
Okay, Jason, I'm just going to say, I knew it that John Fox had nothing to worry about. Not really. Not really.
You know what I have to say? I'm really excited for his college football book that's coming out, because all the talk at Texas has been how Steve Sarkisian has been about the least transparent coach in the history of the school. And I mean, I'm not surprised because I grew up listening to you cover John Fox. So it's a little bit what I'm used to, but I'm looking forward to it nonetheless.
I love it. I think it's going to be interesting. So folks, please go out, get the book, download it if you want. If it's an audio version, is available on Amazon. It's called Spies on the Sidelines. Okay, Jason, what do you got for predictions?
All right, 3 predictions. It is October. What a great time for sports. Major League Baseball playoffs are kicking off, and that's where I'm going to start my predictions for this episode. I'm going to predict my World Series, and I'm going to say that it will be the New York Yankees against the New York Mets. Of course, here in Chicago, we would love a crosstown World Series. Not going to happen this year or anytime soon, but Mets and Yankees, 2 of the best and most exciting teams in the sport. Hope to see them matched up at the end of October. Prediction number 2, I'm going to go to the NBA and make my NBA championship prediction, with the season looking about ready to start in a week or two. I'm going to go with the Memphis Grizzlies as my NBA champion. This is a team that I'm very high on. I'm a huge fan of John Morant. He's my MVP pick for this upcoming season. The Grizzlies are not your conventional NBA team. They are not a super team, not a lot of guys on max contracts. It's Morant. It's a bunch of good role players. One of the best coach teams in the NBA. Was very disappointed to see them make a first-round exit last year, so I'm most excited to see them make a run deep into the playoffs as those come up next year. So my third prediction, and this is going to be with the NFL. And NFL draft stuff heating up, college football getting into conference play. And of course, the Bears are caught in the crosswinds of it. They'll very most likely will have a top 5, probably top 10 pick. And This is a great draft for quarterbacks, as are most drafts, but Justin Fields hasn't really worked out. I am going to make this call right now. I'm going to say that if the Bears have a top 5 pick, they will pick a quarterback. There are 3 quarterbacks that are top draft prospects. Will Levis from Kentucky, CJ Stroud from Ohio State, Bryce Young from Alabama. The Bears know what we all know. If you're positioned for one of those 3, you have to take them. So I want to get that out there now so that when it comes in April and the Bears have a top 5 pick and Justin Fields is out of town, we aren't so surprised by it.
Oh, Jason, I have to totally agree with you on that. I think they're going to do the same thing. Okay, here's my final thoughts, and I'm going to make them quick. You never know who's staying in the hotel room next to you when an NFL team is on the road, right?
Ooh.
Be careful of your phone if you hear the tap, tap, tap while you're talking on the phone to an NFL player. May want to check and make sure you empty the garbage, Tom Brady, after you take the plays off of your wristbands at an away game and drop them in the wastebasket. Just a few thoughts on how NFL espionage happens on the sidelines. I love it. I love true crime and true mystery. And I just think this totally plays into it. And it makes it for a very fun Halloween 2022, right?
Love it, especially with the current state of Chicago sports. Everything's so negative, and so what's it going to look like in 5 years? It's just fun to talk about something different.
I know. Hey, our thanks to Jake Cantu, who always gets us up and running on the ESPN Chicago app. Don't forget that you can follow our guest, Kevin Bryant, on Facebook and Instagram, Kevin Bryant. That's BRYANT.author. He's also on Twitter at Kev Bryant Author and at LinkedIn as well, Kevin Bryant Author. Check out his book, Spies on the Sidelines. And thank you guys all for checking us out on YouTube, on our audio on ESPN Chicago app, checking out the merchandise on our TeePublic store, and of course our website, thesportscastersundersun.com. And Jason,
sportscastersundersun.com, and
our Twitter. I didn't forget.
TSAHS Pod. Make sure to go follow our Twitter, where you can find out all the latest news on the Sportscaster and her son. As my mom just said, you know where to find our audio, ESPN 1000 app, Spotify, SoundCloud, wherever else you listen to your shows, you can find our podcast.
That's it for this episode. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Please download, follow, and tell your friends. And
follow, like, subscribe, retweet, anything positive you can do. It helps us. I love to see it. Brings a smile to my face. So.
And just keep an eye over your shoulder. You never know who's listening to your conversations.
Stop.
Have a great one, everyone. We'll talk to you next time. So long.